Meir Kraus, I'm from Jerusalem. I am a senior fellow in the Jerusalem Institute for Policy Research, which aim to look at Jerusalem challenges, and I devoted most of my time there looking at the geopolitical challenges of Jerusalem, which are very heavy. And I'm also a fellow in the Shalom Hartman Research Institute, which deals with Jewish studies, and I try to combine both. My presentation today is very challenging since it took me about 28 hours to come from Jerusalem to Moscow, and I want to take you to a journey to Jerusalem, and we have just less than 20 minutes, so we'll see. Last June we have celebrated the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Jerusalem, and we are on our way to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the State of Israel. And I want to share with you some thoughts, suggesting in this context of time a platform for discussion about Jerusalem in its future. Jerusalem, as you know, Israel's capital, the heart of the Jewish people, has a history of more than 4,000 years. Many cultures and ruling authorities existed in the city: Canaanites, Israelites, Babylonians, Romans, Muslims, Ottomans, and Jews for sure, just to name a few. All of them, which is very important, have left their impression of the city as seal that has been carved into its stone, its earth, its atmosphere, its building, and its culture. And Jerusalem is also a spiritual center for hundreds of millions of people from the three monotheistic religions. They see the city as a place where spirit aspires, a center of significance as embodied in the term Heavenly Jerusalem. What is striking when we look at Jerusalem history and spirituality is the diversity of cultures and the variety of religions. And the presence of universality, spirituality, and their multicultural character in the city is not only theoretical but tangible. Anyone strolling the city streets can, if they choose to do so, observe a vast range of culture that exists alongside one another: synagogues, mosques, churches, centers for religious studies which represent Jewish, Christian, Muslims communities across the world. Likewise, Jerusalem hosts the branches of many international organizations, a global movement, government delegation, communal centers, and even cemeteries of different communities that resided in the past in Jerusalem and still have a mark on the city's landscape. Let me share with you my own daily experience. Within a 7-minute walk from my home are synagogues that are traditional Orthodox, modern Orthodox, Orthodox integrating women, egalitarian, conservative, ultra-Orthodox yeshiva, and Beit Midrash for Jewish renewal. Yet, this is only a selective picture from a Jewish particular perspective. Within the same 7 minutes walk radius, there are also German Templar Cemetery, an Armenian church, a Greek community center, and the International Christian Embassy. A few minutes away are monasteries, Moscow too, and the neighborhood is called the German colony. Isn't it fascinating universal mosaic? The variety is not just about places and institutions. The city's inhabitants themselves present mosaic of religions, Christian cultures, and nations. 60% Israelis, 40% Palestinians, Jews from all kinds, Christians from all sects, and Muslims from different communities. And here come the big challenge. On this multicultural, multi-religion, and universal platform, a particular drama is occurred. When I look at Jerusalem, what I see is never-ending competition over the city's character. Israelis and Palestinians, Jews, Muslims and Christians, and even within the Jews, secular, ultra-Orthodox, and Jews from other denominations, just to remind you the Kotel issue, compete with one another to imprint the city with their own seal and shape its physical and symbolic landscape to suit only their identity and image. They are not only seek to enhance their own presence, they also wish to exclude, obscure, or erase signs of everybody else's presence. Sorry. Every group claims that its Jerusalem is the only and the right Jerusalem. Those groups are saying, we are Jerusalem, all the others, all the rest are the others. In fact, each of the competitors wish an exclusivity on the city. The competition exists for all Jerusalem, but its intensity for the Holy Mountain by both Jews and Palestinians is frightening and worrisome. Indeed, this competition is potentially the most dangerous factor influencing Jerusalem's future, its physical landscape, and the lives of its residents, its social fabric, and the sense of belonging among its supporters from all over the world. What are the origins of this competition? What are its sources? Where this competition comes from? Corresponding to the real Jerusalem, its physical infrastructure, the people living there, and the fabric of life that exists within it, exists the heavenly Jerusalem. When I say heavenly Jerusalem, I do not mean that there exists a parallel city of mystical space as some tend to believe. I do mean the Jerusalem which exists in our spirit, in our consciousness, in our emotion, and in the spirit, in the consciousness, and in the emotion of others, of all those who Jerusalem in their hearts. Yehuda Amichai is known as the poet of Jerusalem, described Jerusalem's complicated reality like this. The air above Jerusalem is saturated with prayers and dreams. Like the air above industrial towns, it's hard to breathe. Indeed, so many dreams have been dreamed about this unique city. So many prayers have been prayed by all kinds of believers, turning to this much desired city with their wishes and yearnings. These dreams and prayers have created the heavenly Jerusalem, but they didn't remain only in heaven. They have insignificantly influenced Jerusalem reality and have become an inseparable part of its image, atmosphere, and landscape. While beautiful and spiritual, this picture of dream, prayers, and reality is the most challenging. Why is that? The reality of the city, universal and multicultural. The dreams and the prayers are exclusive, particular, and contradictive. The encounter between the dreams and the prayers with the reality of the city is the primary source of the competition, the primary source of the pollution, as Amichai wrote. It's hard to breathe. This is what happened to us in 1967. Particularistic spirituality and particularistic longing and expectation met a universal and a multi-dimensional reality. Our dreams and prayers for 2,000 years of return to Zion met with a complex reality, with the city holy to other religions, whose population is multi-religious, multicultural, multinational, and competition is the result of this encounter. What are the means and strategies which are used in this competition? We see this competition in regulation, planning, building, and development. But first and foremost, the competition is over narrative and perceptions. Each party seeks to glorify its own narrative of attachment to this special place, while dismissing or at least minimizing the other's narrative. Let us look at historical narratives. History in Jerusalem is not just the background of the city or its inhabitants. History there is nor an intellectual field, neither a source of cultural inspiration. History there is something which is alive, exists, part of the current identity of people, and a weapon in the competition arsenal. Here's an example of profound influence of historical narrative on reality. Let me share with you something very interesting. No one in the history conquered the city. Anyone who comes to Jerusalem, he returned to it. In 1187, Salah ad-Din conquered Jerusalem after 88 years of Crusaders' rule. He, in his shoulders, declared, "We Muslims return to the Holy Land and to Jerusalem. We, the Muslims, liberated it from the rule of the infidels." In October 1917, during the First World War, Lloyd George, Prime Minister of England, commanded General Allenby, the commander of the campaign here in the Middle East, to liberate Jerusalem before Christmas. On December 11th, Allenby entered the gates of Jerusalem. A special prayers was performed at St. Paul Cathedral, not just because of the victory. The bells in all the churches in Rome also rang for an entire hour, as if proclaiming, "We, the Christians, came back to the holy city." When our turn came, 2,000 years after the destruction of the temple, and after 2,000 years of exile, in which we preserved our memory in our daily lives, mourned the destruction, guided our prayers to Jerusalem, mentioned it in blessings and ceremonies, waited for the day of redemption. After all those years, in 1967, we said, we came back to Jerusalem, this time forever. So Jerusalem is a significant component of all its stakeholders' identity, and competition over the historical narratives come to enhance each one's identity while weaken the other one identity. And it's not just historical narrative, it's also theology. Theology also serves as a tool in the competition of Jerusalem. Theology speaking, for all the three religions, it's a real challenge that another religion is controlling the holy sites or even the Holy Land. Sheikh Kardawi from Egypt is the most influential Qadi in the Middle East. He said Jerusalem under Israel regime is a stain in the forehead of the Muslims. And there are so many Jewish sources, painful sources, which refer to the catastrophe of the destruction of the temple, and that foreigners are controlling this place, as it said in Elicha, "For the mountain of Zion, which is desolate, the foxes walk on it." And in the Christian world also, it used to be very difficult that the synagogue is controlling the Holy Land and the holy sites of the Ecclesia. In this regard, I have to say that the Vatican has made significant steps during the last 50 years in order to theologically accept the Jewish control in the holy sites. And here, holiness itself serves as a pawn in the competition. The Temple Mount, the holiest site of the Jewish people on which the temple stood, has been a holy site for Muslims for the last 1,300 years. It is at the heart of the conflict, as you all know. Both sides have conflicting religious and national aspiration for this holy place. And as if Jerusalem lacks holiness and holy places, the various competitors constantly add sanctity to its holiness. For example, in order not to leave any place on the Temple Mount that is not full of Muslims' holiness, the Palestinians have turned an area on the mountain plaza into a pantheon, a cemetery for Muslim leadership. So too King Abdallah declared 2 years ago, the entire mountain is Al-Aqsa, meaning that it is not only the mosques that stand in the southwestern corner, but the sanctity of the place mentioned in the Islamic sources is all over the mountain. But what is fascinating in the equation is the equation created by the two sides of the conflict over the sanctity. And this is very interesting and very crucial. This equation claims that what is holy to me must be under my sovereignty and ownership. The implication of this equation are that both sides seek the Temple Mount to be under their exclusive sovereignty. The equation is wrong because the two terms, holiness and sovereignty, are quite different. The term sovereignty refers to define exclusivity in a given space, but holiness does not concern exclusivity. In the Jewish tradition, Kedusha, holiness, serves as a space in which man is excluded from control. The control, ownership, or may we say sovereignty of a space of holiness is God's. The idea of waqf in the Muslim tradition expresses a similar concept. A person dedicated his asset to Allah, thereby ensuring that no one can change the purpose of this sanctuary. Holiness, not like sovereignty, can be inclusive. There is nothing to prevent that what is sacred for me can be simultaneously holy for the other. But holiness is mobilized in favor of struggle and competition. And alongside the competition about sanctity comes the denial. A denial that involves erasing the connection of the other side, or at least reducing it to a minimum. Here is an extreme example, a famous example of denial which perhaps you are familiar with. At Camp David summit in 2000, Yasser Arafat claimed in front of President Clinton that the temple of the Jews was in Yemen and that the Jews' claim to Jerusalem is another Zionist takeover plot now aimed at the Muslims' holy of holies. He made Clinton very upset. Another example, from the 20th on, the Waqf produced a brochure for tourists who are visiting the Temple Mount. It was written in it explicitly that this place was the place where Solomon Temple used to be. In 1953, this sentence disappeared from the brochure and never came back. But we have to admit that we have our own ways to ignore the other side connection to the holy places. Why? Some public leaders in Israel have become expert, quotation mark, in culture and birth of Islam, and repeatedly insist that the Muslim bond with Jerusalem is a new theory with no historical foundation. This is the competition for a variety of its strategies. Where do we go with this competition? Either a way to stop the competition and change its harmful direction, either is a way to solve this complexity of holiness, theology, history, and national aspirations. Let's go back to the big city and take a look in if there is a key to a different reality. As we said, when I look at this physical landscape and at the imprint left by the culture that ruled over this city across generations, when I look around at the global space and see millions of people from different religions and cultures who feel a bond with the city, I am left with this enormous question. Who is the other in this city? Is there an other in this city? We, all the competitors, must recognize the real city as it is and what the city is symbolized for all those who hold it dear. We all have to change our mindset, give up the demand of exclusiveness, and think about sharing the city. The desire to have Jerusalem be mine does not exclude the possibility that it be yours as well. Jerusalem can and should be a city for all. We need a true revolution of perception about among all cities' stakeholders. We must exchange the competition over the city's future character and image for a partnership and a collective commitment to preserve its diverse past, a commitment that encompasses all the city's residents' supporters, that acknowledge all their bonds with Jerusalem and their aspirations. We have to stop the competition not just to prevent its dangerous implication, rather to foster Jerusalem to a new era. Diversity should not be Jerusalem's weakness, but rather its source of strength and its key to its prosperity. The way to make this change is to adapt a human observation at the people and their desires, those who are living in Jerusalem as well as those who find meaning in this city and its spirituality from all over the world. In this regard, let's go back to Yehuda Amichai. He suggests us the following in one of his songs. Once I sat on the steps by a gate at David's tower. I placed my two heavy baskets at my side. A group of tourists was standing around their guide, and I became their target marker. You see that man with the baskets? Just right of his head, there is an arch from the Roman period, just to the right of his head. I said to myself, redemption will come only if the guide tells him, you see that arch from the Roman period? It's not important. But next to it, left and down a bit, there sits a man who has brought fruit and vegetables for his family. What a remarkable call to humanity. So we need serious collective in-depth thinking to be able to change the situation and direct Jerusalem to a new era. There are many potential partners who would participate in such a discussion. All of those who feel a sense of connection and belonging. They all need to be invited to this universal discussion. It's about time. As the current ruling authority, Israel would do well to initiate a collective discussion along these lines, inviting all stakeholders to the table in Jerusalem, states, international entities, religious and other delegations. I am not ignoring the question of sovereignty of Jerusalem. This is, of course, a question at the heart of the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which I am deeply involved in my geopolitical work. But I propose looking at Jerusalem from a much broader perspective, addressing the historical, spiritual, cultural, human and universal dimension of Jerusalem as befits this unique city. Given its past as well as its present, Jerusalem deserves that we not confine our thinking to the standard formal, legal and familiar concept of sovereignty. The ideas that would emerge from this course of universal participation will undoubtedly generate new possibilities for the city. And maybe, in complete contrast to what is happening today, the concept of holiness can serve as an inclusive foundation that unites human beings who in their own individual ways feel a special sense of spirituality in this unique shared place. There is a conceptual basis for this. Yeah, let's read it. In biblical times, Isaiah prophesied, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the top of a mountain, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. Micha added a verse that contained incredible universal insight. For let all the peoples walk in each one in the name of his God, but we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. Are we ready for such a change of consciousness? Are we capable of discarding competition and instead conducting a dialogue based on partnership? Are we ready for sharing the city? Just imagine Jerusalem as an active center for spiritual experience from all kinds, and millions of people coming to be inspired by the atmosphere of the city. Just imagine Jerusalem as a worldwide center for dialogue between faith, cultures, and nations, holding all the international organizations for interfaith, multicultural justice, humanity, and peace. This is the profound discussion we must hold, a discussion that touches the root of our identity, the most sensitive strings of our national aspiration, a discussion that touches the raw nerves of our religious aspiration and the value we give to a life of peace. This is the challenge for Jerusalem's life.
Amen.